Okay, I just need to move a few things around. So I'm talking about constructive engagement in the UK Parliament. Go on. Come on, slides, you can go. So the most important message is we're using existing channels. We're not doing external campaigning, trying to persuade people from the outside. We're getting involved in things like this APPG, which I'll explain in a minute, parliamentary questions, getting members of our group to ask official questions and demand for which the minister is required to answer. We promote minor debates in both the houses. They have particular ways where you can debate a particular issue for, say, an hour. And we take part in consultations. So talking about some of the work in the APPG for men and boys, this is an all-party parliamentary group. And it's a voluntary group of members of the Houses of Lords and Commons. It's not an official part of the government process. However, for example, if the chair is speaking to the minister, this has more weight than the individual MP or an external group trying to speak to the minister. And as you'll see, once we start to get the discussion going, unexpected things happen. So as Larry says, we're covering many of the areas which he mentioned at the beginning, not all at once, and we're looking at the first three of those just in this quick presentation today. So we've held these inquiries, as Larry mentioned. So we're looking at the outcomes for the men's health strategy. The message which we got from this is that there's far too much victim blaming. That is, there's far too much of why don't men seek health services like women do, then they would have better health. But what we found, among other things, is that men do seek help, do seek the services when they're offered where, when, and how men access them. For instance, men are much more reluctant than women to take time off work, so that if you offer the services out of hours or near their workplace, men do access them just as much as women. And the real teller is that at retirement, the statistics are clear, men access health services just as often as women. If we look at male suicide, again, we see the same myth being perpetrated. There are even National Health Service posters saying men should talk more. This again is victim blaming. It's not trying to understand why men are wanting to kill themselves. It's blaming men for wanting to kill themselves. And what we found is that men do talk when the services are offered, where, when, and how men do. And an example we had was from Andy's Man Club in the UK. This is a relatively new organisation, but it has exponential growth because of the way that they're offering their services. They're not offering men to come into the room and sit down with one person and some smelly candles and be asked how they are. They meet as a group, and the way that the meeting is organised clearly chimes with men's psychology. The latest piece of work we've done is on boys' educational underachievement, which, as people probably know, is almost universal. Certainly it's universal in the Anglosphere. And boys are underachieving, at every age and stage of their education. They're arriving at primary school with poorer language skills, and they are going to university less often than women and dropping out more frequently. But again, we get the same problem, that many of the people looking at this issue, and we looked at a lot of research on this, much of it is basically blaming the boys for not being like the girls. However, we found 4 schools, and then 2 later, that had closed the gap for their boys. And one of the important issues was that it did not try to make it boy-friendly. What they did was they discovered, by visiting the classrooms and observing what was happening, is that the adults were treating the boys differently, and that the boys' behavior and low achievement is a result of the different treatment. For instance, boys are given punishments more readily than girls, but are also praised for lower standards of work than the girls. When these things are corrected, the boys achieve the same as the girls. Let's look at the 4 areas where the correction was put. Firstly, they recognized that it was a whole school culture. They just need to make it fair for the boys, for instance, by celebrating achievements of both sexes in all subjects. Secondly, they worked heavily on relationships, both between the teachers and the pupil, and between the school and the home, because once they engaged the parents, they found their efforts were twice as effective. Thirdly, boosting literacy. Many schools have interventions with pupils when they first arrive at secondary school, but in fact, only a small minority of special needs pupils actually get help. And what these schools found is that if they intervened with a larger number of pupils, mostly boys, they found that one of the main reasons the students were failing is because they didn't have the language to access the curriculum. And finally, what they needed was a rewards and consequences system, which was not so much strict as characterized by certainty and consistency. So everybody knows where they are, and the teachers know that they're going to be backed up by the senior management. And what we found is that any schools can do it. It didn't require any more money. So there's a really important question: why is it not happening? So what we achieved, some of the things we achieved is select committees. Select committees are official parts of the government process. And as a result of us doing our reports, the Select Committee on Health did a inquiry into men's health, and the Select Committee on Education did an inquiry into boys' education. And we were making some progress before the election was called. Unfortunately, the Minister for Health had set up what she called a task and finish group. She found that it didn't need her to spend ages and ages setting up a men's health strategy, which might take several years. There were some things which could be done straight away, and they were getting active on that. The other thing we can mark is a significant tone regarding men and boys issues in the UK Parliament. For instance, when the debate on International Men's Day, which has taken place every year for the last 7 years, was first in place, the proposers of it received quite a lot of negative response from some parts of the House and some flack on social media. But in the last year, for instance, more speakers at that debate were female, and there were no hostile speeches at all. So in conclusion, although the system is not proactive on male issues, what we found is by constructively engaging with the system, we can produce results. Thank you very much.
And Mike, thank you. And